We'll start now. We'll record now. I won't repeat my introduction. You guys heard it. So next Friday, using NVIVO for literature review, we are recording, which I reminded myself, which is good. And what I do is I upload the recordings to the SCPA YouTube channel, and I'll post you the link this afternoon. Also, one more thing, please become a member of the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association. It's free and the form only takes a couple of minutes. So I'll pop the link in the chat box. So that's all from me. Over to you, Robert. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. Okay, a couple of ground rules for me, the way I operate, is if there is something that I don't explain well or don't say clearly, or it just raises more questions, please make sure you find a way to get me to clarify. Either interrupt or put something in the chat box. So please feel free to do that. I'm not so good at watching the chat box and everything else. I know Alison's going to help me to make up some of those deficits, but it will be good to have that and make it a little bit more interactive. Plus, there are some questions I'm going to put to you as we go along as well. So today, looking at invigorating your research and introducing NVIVO, and I'll explain the first few minutes just going to be explanations, lowering your expectations so that at the end you think, oh, that wasn't so bad after all. So that's how we're going to proceed this morning. Alison gave an acknowledgement to country earlier, and I'd like to commence with my acknowledgement of country as well. I grew up here in Lismore. My mother, my grandfather, his mother, and there's another couple of generations prior to that. Probably the first white people settled in this area of Lismore. Over these very few generations, relatively speaking, we've certainly become attached to this land, and I know when I'm away from this area, I feel homesick. In reflecting on that, I imagine that the little insight I have into connection with land is quite small in relation to the connection that the Aboriginal peoples of this land have after so many thousands of generations. So I acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Widjabul-Waibul people of the Bundjalung Nation. I pay my respects to them. I thank them for the beauty of this land, which I know that they preserve. And I hope that the activities that I engage in and that we as a research body will also add to the restoration of justice and for the healing of hurts that have been felt for so long by so many people. Okay, if you haven't completed that little questionnaire at the start, would you mind doing it? It's just to help me evaluate. The idea of doing it is that so at the end, I can ask you another few questions, and then I can see what am I doing well, what do I need to do better, and so as to improve on this. Now, I should say this, also in the chat box, you'll see that there's the link to copy if that's easier. This program, or this workshop, started out quite a number of years ago, and I called it Taming the Beast, because NVIVO seemed to be such a beast to get your head around. I remember studying my PhD, and then with all the documents that I had, just trying to balance them, and then at the workshop, I thought, oh, this is really good. And then I just discovered how little I knew. It was such a big thing. So the initial iteration of this workshop was Taming the Beast. A few years later, when I redid it, I realized, no, it's not so much NVIVO. NVIVO is a good thing, but my project is a beast. So whichever way it's going to be for you today, I hope that this will be a useful session. But I need to clarify what this is not. It's not going to be a detailed introduction to all the functions and intricacies of NVIVO. There are many. You can go to courses, and they will put you through several days of training, and they will work their way through all the menu options. We're not going to do that today. This is looking at what is the functionality of NVIVO. Is this something that you might be able to use and incorporate into your research? And if so, what are some of the things that you need to start thinking about now as you advance those plans to use NVIVO? Excuse me. I'm guessing some are already underway with a project and have brought NVIVO in, but probably trying to work out how it all fits together and how to make the most of it. Others will be anticipating engaging in their research. And at this point, I imagine it's a matter of finding out, so what are the tools that I need to get? And then how do I skill myself so that I can use the tools well and with rigor and ensure that, that the best results come out of this research. So this is an overview of the usefulness. Oh, excuse me, this is... My apologies. Okay, I'm also not going to delve into detailed instruction on the design of your research project. In seeing the some of the enrollments or registrations for this morning, I see that we have a wide range of disciplines represented in our group. We also, I would therefore think, in addition to the complication of a range of disciplines, there will also be a range of methodologies, a range of methods, of emphasis, a whole range of complications that makes your project individual and specific. So this is going to be an introduction to a tool that you can use to manage your data, that can support your analysis and can help you in the reporting. And ultimately, we've got to get work out, so being able to move towards reporting is very important. I also plan that it would be a signpost to some of the critical moments in the research project for you. So hopefully there will be some, you'll find that it touches on some questions that you've got in your mind and you think, okay, that's also what I'm thinking about, and here's some clues about how I advance from this point on. Hopefully too, it's an opportunity to access some helpful resources. I think one of those resources, which will be very helpful too, is knowing that there are other people around in a similar situation, other people who may be at a similar stage of their research process. And I mean, that's a resource not to be undervalued as well. So remember, at any time, please break in with questions. So you've got me at the front. What does that mean? I'm a practitioner. I'm not an expert with NVIVO. I've done NVIVO training. I've been to tutorials. I've done formal training. I've been using this since 2010. My story is that having been to a training session, I'm engaging my PhD research. I was looking at government documents, and I've got to tell you, if that's where your research is headed, God bless you, it's tedious and boring work. But in one of the groups of documents I had, there were over 1,000 documents that I needed to sort through. 1,053. Now, I could work with my Excel spreadsheet, and I was confident that I had 1,052 or I had 1,054, but I could never actually pin it down to the 153. Then I was introduced to NVIVO. So I got to play with NVIVO. Basically it was the January holidays, going through online tutorials, teaching myself, trying to get all the different concepts in my head. NVIVO speaks its own language. So trying to understand how all those concepts worked, how they work together, and then how are they operationalized within the software. I was creating projects and then destroying them and starting again until I got it straight in my head. Since then, I've worked on lots of different projects with NVIVO, either by myself or in teams with other researchers. I've also been engaged with tutoring postgraduates and others in how to employ NVIVO in a whole range of disciplines and in a whole range of different projects. I love NVIVO. I was joking with someone yesterday about a different thing, but it applies here to NVIVO too. I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I think this really is a very good piece of software. It's also something that's growing and developing, and I'll mention that a couple of times as well. So what was NVIVO when I first started? It was NVIVO 9. We're now up to NVIVO 14. And NVIVO 9 had come out of NVIVO 8, and prior to that, it was Nudist. Nudist was developed by some researchers who I'm told on very good authority lived up in this far coast region of Australia. She was the social researcher and he was the computer programmer. And so she got him to develop the first program, and they found this wonderful set of initials supposed to come up with the name Nudist. But this academic who knows the originators of the original program said they didn't just call it Nudist because it was funny. It's actually because they were also. So that's part of the history that even the company has forgotten about now. So I remind them from time to time. Okay, I like it because it gives me confidence and because there's a funny story behind it. All of the data that I have is classified and accounted for, so it's sorted into lots of different buckets. It helps me with my coding. It makes it a clear process and a visualized process. So I can see when I'm dragging and dropping or highlighting and right-clicking and all of that. I've used it in my PhD project. There were over 100 codes that were developed, but they were all sorted, all in order, all linked, all defined. And that was a really useful thing because as you get into your research projects, especially when you're new to research, it can be a little bit overwhelming and it grows like topsy, but to have a piece of software that keeps it in order is just brilliant. I had interview transcripts to use. Well, initially they were just interviews. I was then able to import them into NVIVO. I donned my earphones and a microphone. I also had a bit of, was it voice to text software as well? And I was able to transcribe. I then pulled them out of the sound feature, edited them again with the sounds playing, and then a final edit was done in Word. So I was able to use NVIVO for transcription. This is one of the areas that has greatly improved, and I'll talk about that further when we get onto an introduction to data. Analysis was aided by visualizations, so charts and graphs and dendrograms. Dendrograms were useful for some of the things I was wanting. They're the ones that look like tree roots and show you which things are more closely related. So I use that for my documents to find out which groups of people were actually sharing information and copying each other's letters when they were writing to the government. So the visualizations can be very helpful as well. Memos, you write notes to yourself. You write your ideas about your research, your ideas about where do I think this coding framework is headed? What are my initial conclusions at this point? Let's make a memo and keep it to the side so I can come back to it later. Or let's see what comes out of my supervisory meeting. Are there some points there that I really need to keep close to my research? So you can enter them into your project as well. And the beautiful thing about NVIVO, I think its strength, is that everything can be cross-linked. I was once working with a student who wasn't going to use NVIVO because he said, no, it just pulls everything apart. And I since thought about it, what was it that was happening for him at the time? and realize that it's actually not that it pulls it apart, it's just that it links everything together. It lines it all up and it looks like everything is separated and deconstructed, but actually links are made between everything so that you can see who it is. Say, who is the female aged 18 to 25 who lives in Sydney, who has made this comment on this particular theme, and then you can compare it to other groups of people. So all these different things about the person's characteristics, the letter that they wrote, the picture that they took, the transcript that you've made, how do all those bits link together? So NVIVO is actually all about connecting so that you can then draw your conclusions about what is the information that I can draw from this, from all this data. Now, research rigor, it's something I'm going to come back and discuss briefly towards the end, because there are some very important points that we need to take notice of with research rigor. But it is one of the advantages of NVIVO. If you use it properly, then it's going to be evidence of the rigor with which you have worked. I mean, that said, garbage in, garbage out. It can just be a tool that you just apply willy-nilly and it looks good. You feel great because you've used something that's a bit sophisticated. Supervisors are pleased because you've just shown them what you want them to see. But if you use it right, it will actually add to your rigor. It will record the research decisions that you've made and will track through and keep an audit or allow for an audit process of your work, which also means if something goes wrong during your analysis or as you're drawing your conclusions or trying to answer a question of your data, because it's so structured and because you've spent all the time making the links between this person and what they said here and what they said at this different timepiece, then you are able to see how the research has evolved and be able to justify the conclusions that you've come to. One of the other things that is advantageous, it's sort of a detail, but it's also quite important, is that you can build your code book as you go along. Now, the code book is the record of the codes that you have developed that explain the concepts that you are applying in the analysis of your data. So the code book is the thing that at the end, if when the supervisor or you're sending off a publication and someone says, look, we'd really like to have a look at your work, you can show them the code book with the definitions and they'll be able to see how that works and agree that, yes, you've made the right decisions. Or maybe they will argue. But either way, there will be the evidence that rigor has been applied to your research. Now, I've talked for quite a little bit. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. So I just read the. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. So what actually is NVIVO? Now, if you look at some of the older material, some publications that have used NVIVO in research, you will see that it used to belong to a company called QSR. Can't remember what that stands for, but QSR. It was an Australian-based company, as I said, developed initially locally to the north coast of New South Wales, and then based out of Melbourne. It was then consequently sold and was operating out of, I think it was New York, certainly in the US. But in January, it's all changed, and now it belongs to a company called Lumivero. So NVIVO is Lumivero's easy-to-use, collaborative, qualitative analysis software that allows researchers to import, organize, explore, connect, and collaborate on their data to reveal more significant insights from their qualitative data faster. So that's the claim that the company makes about the software. So it's basically there to support researchers. And its function is growing. Some of it you will access as part of your just standard research process. But there are other parts that are sort of add-ons, like the collaboration part is something that you can, something you can take advantage of, but there are extra fees involved to use the collaboration tools within NVIVO. Now, NVIVO, if you're going looking for references for NVIVO, that's a good thing. But if you want to look more broadly, look for writings about cactus. So NVIVO is an example of a cactus. It's a computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software. So that's its general description. So when you're doing your literature searches to support your methods, your methodology, then a broad search for cactus as applies to your discipline or as applies to your particular research methodology. That's the term I'd recommend you use in your searches, as well as looking for NVIVO specifically. Now, the emphasis with NVIVO is qualitative research. So, dear quantitative researchers, don't reject NVIVO if you say, look, I'm a rats and stats person rather than a qualitative researcher. I say that because I see the advantage of NVIVO across the spectrum of research projects and research priorities. Even if you aren't engaging in qualitative research, or perhaps if your research is in two parts, there's a qualitative side and there's a quantitative side, you will find advantage here. Now, just some of the basic things are, everything can be in the one place at the one time. So you can structure NVIVO so that all your field notes are there, all your graphs, all your SPSS data can also be in there, communications with your supervisor, with interviewees, people you've surveyed, whatever, that can all be there together. In addition, once you've got those things included in an NVIVO project, then you are also able to code them the same as you would your qualitative data. So you can then go back through your field notes and say, so what was I thinking about at this point in my research? Even if it's a quantitative research project, you may still find this useful. Excuse me. Alison also mentioned briefly at the start that we're going to have a look at literature reviews next week. Doing a literature review is something that NVIVO is certainly good at doing. I mean, a literature review basically is gathering data, analyzing it, and reporting on it. But there are some things we can do to make that process easier and tweak it specifically for a literature review as well. So even if you're a qualitative researcher, you'll still find advantages in applying NVIVO to your literature research. Okay. No questions. Excellent. Either you're all asleep or I'm explaining reasonably well at this point. Okay, so what does it look like? Okay, see Julie nodding. I don't know whether that's a yes or staying away. But okay, what's it look like? When you go to NVIVO, you'll open it up and you'll get a page that looks a little bit like this. Now, this has already got a project developed within it, hence all the extra lines, the page that's open on the right. So everything about NVIVO is highly structured. And so the layout is also, excuse me. Now, what I've got circled there in red is the navigation pane. Eventually, you'll learn where everything is. That navigation pane is vital because it shows you where to go to open up your data files. It's where all the codes will be sent to, and you can have multiple folders opened up so that you've got, if you say applying a couple of different theoretical perspectives, then you might have a coding framework for each theory. So you can have multiple folders set up there as well. The cases, so they're the buckets that you put the different people or things into, the things that you are studying. So they will be classified. There are notes. Further down the screen, you would find a thing called set. So you can create groupings of your data or groupings of codings so that you've got useful set that you can just go to rather than scrolling through, say, 1,000 documents. You've got the 25 on a specific topic that are set aside for you and easy to find. So lots of good functionality that's included there for us. Now, across the top, we have our menu bar. It's open at the moment on the Create tab. So here are all the different things, or the different things that we can create within NVIVO. So we can create memos, a framework matrix that helps bring different parts of our research data together in a framework for analysis and for summary. We can create relationships, linking different people and things together. Codes, which is the thing that I think you will find certainly initially the most used for. We can create a new document in the different sections, a new case, so we can generate a person. So you might have you still need to create a case for that. So Mary might be the person who's been interviewed. Now we have to create a case called Mary, and then we will have to classify that case. So Mary lives in Queensland, so Mary will be classified as a Queenslander. You can also classify the different files that you've got. So they might be classified as archival footage versus contemporary footage, or they might be letters as opposed to government documents. So files can also be put in different sets of buckets. Then there are sets and then creating folders, which is similar to what you're used to using Windows anyhow. So that's there. Sorry, we've got files, so that will take us to some of the functionality at the back of NVIVO. You've got the home page and then the import, which we will get to a little bit later. That's about the different types of data that we can use. Exploring is, do we want to do a text search? Do we want to look for a specific word? Do we want to look for word frequencies? What are the sorts of questions that we want to pose to our data? And then we've got opportunities for sending that to other people and creating some graphics as well. This is our list view. Now, down the bottom, just below the red circle, you see it says for me 8 items. So it's a count for me that there are 8. In this case, I can tell by the icon that's there, there are 8 PDFs that are included in this folder. Now, it's a bit hard, well, you can't read it. Here it says codes, where there's 11111111. So each of these PDFs, I can tell has been coded once. So there is one code that's been associated with each of them. Now, under here, it will talk about references. So this first document has been, there is one code attached to it, but there are 3 parts of it that have been coded. And this one's been coded twice, and this one 3 times, and this one 4 times. So the list view, you get to keep an eye on that. That gives you lots of clues about where you're at, how well you're doing. Like if there was a 0 here, I think, oh, I've missed one. So I'll go back and do it again. If this one comes out at 10 and everything else is at 2 and 3, I'm thinking, oh, there's something really interesting going on in this one. I need to investigate it further. So you get used to looking at the list view. It applies to the documents, it applies to the codes, the cases. They will all appear there in the list view as you ask for them to come up. And then you've got the detail view. The detail view is where you get all the information that is part of that thing that you've called up. So here I've called up a PDF, and this is one that was taken from a statement from the Prime Minister's office, and I can go through and I can read that. I can also change it so that I can see it as a document and see what coding has been added to it. I can go through and I can highlight it and say, well, this bit here is really interesting. This talks very much about regional communities. So I'll highlight it, tell NVIVO, I want this to be flagged, coded as regional communities. It will do it and it will highlight it for me so I can see it and track it and link it to other things later on. Any questions at this point? No?
I've had a question, Robert.
Yep.
It's a student wanting to know where they can get the
good.
software. So I know that it's available in all the SCU labs.
Yes, that's the easiest way.
Okay.
Other than that, send an email through to IT.
Yes.
And ask them, and they will give you the access information and the activation key that you will need.
Okay, terrific.
IT will be your friend. Oh, Julie, you might have some more up-to-date info, yeah?
Okay, thanks for that.
No, it's I've asked the question. I live in Victoria and I can't get on site, and I've only got version 12 and was told that was all we had when I got given a key and loaded it onto my home computer. That was a good, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. And I just wondered whether Southern Cross has got now the most up-to-date version, because I'm still using nodes and not codes, for example.
Okay, you're using both? That's okay.
Well, my version is version 12,
okay,
which is still using nodes and not codes. And I'm just wondering whether, I mean, I can contact IT, but I don't want to waste my time if we haven't got the latest version.
Okay.
Is 12 still the minimum, the best we've got?
That's what they've what technology services have listed is NVIVO 12 in all labs. So maybe, yeah.
Somebody's actually just said they've got 14 from IT, so I'll contact them.
Oh, there you go. Great.
Thank you.
I don't know when, but it has changed. Now, part of this is, I think it's the development of Lingard. It used to be that you would download the program onto your computer and you would use it from there. But they are increasingly web-based.
Yeah.
I went and checked this yesterday because I thought I used my own copy of it, so I better go and check where we're at the moment with the university. So I would say, Julie, go and speak to IT again. There is the web-based access. Now, part of the advantage of that is that when it's linked in, as I said, it's an extra fee that you pay, but when it's linked in with this collaboration possibility, then your web-based project can be worked on in your computer in Victoria, and you do what you need to do, and then it's saved to the cloud. And then so your supervisor comes on and looks at your project and says, yeah, this is good. Here's a couple of changes I'd suggest. And then it's synced for both of you. So it's cloud-based, and that's where the 14s come in. And look, the 14's nice. There's no loss of function. There's some extra nice things on it. You've just got to get used to it being cloud-based rather than more situated on your hard drive. But yeah, ask them about it. Now, is there a Mac version? Oh, Janice, you've asked the hard one. Okay, there is for many years there has been a Mac version of NVIVO, but it hasn't been so good. I was working on a project with a colleague a number of years ago. She was using her Mac. She was from another university, and that was the preference in the department she was with. And as we were working this project with the Mac, we discovered that there were some serious limitations. There were functionalities in PC that weren't present in Mac. Now, increasingly, the Mac version is catching up to the PC version. And having this cloud-based collaboration means that any deficits that might still exist with Mac, and I'm not sure of the specifics of them at the moment, but any deficits are sort of being overcome by having this cloud collaboration, which will also link to someone else's PC. So yes, there is a Mac version. There are ways around it. There are a couple of, what do you say? There's some hacks you would probably need to access. The biggest issue I find with Mac is you've got to make sure you've got a way to right click. That was always the most disappointing part of using a Mac. I couldn't right click. So if you've got that sorted, great, go for it. Other than that, try to do it on PC.
Looks like Tina has it on her Mac.
Yes. Now, Tina, can I ask, at what level are you researching? Is it a big project with lots of different data sources? Is it a single person project? Is it PhD? Is it honors, masters? Do you mind just telling us a few of those details?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll talk. Sounds like a big answer, but I'm doing my honors, so I'm just using interviews. I'm not using any other data sources, like
Okay.
what's or social media or anything like that.
Okay, that will be perfectly adequate for that.
Beautiful.
Particularly when you're working in a team and you're looking at intercoder reliability measures. So to what degree does the coding that I'm doing agree with the coding that you're doing on the same documents? That sort of thing was one of the limitations we previously found with Macs. So that will be fine for what you're doing. I'll be surprised if it isn't. So look, for most people, the Mac will be fine. But I still have issues I'm seeing my therapist about because of trying to use the Mac in the past. So if you have issues, contact me through Alison, and we'll try and find a solution for you if you reach the limitations of the Mac. But increasingly too, it is being brought up to par with PC. My work is not rocket science. Oh, I'm so disappointed with that, Dennis.
There was just one more question too, Robert. Zoe asked.
Covidence.
Yes.
Okay, we've got someone else here studying Covidence as well.
For literature review, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I don't know Covidence. There are a number of cactus around. Leximancer is another piece of software that's used for research. So look, I can't comment on Covidence. If it's working for you, go for it. My suggestion is, though, depending on how far into your project you are, go with NVIVO for a couple of reasons. One is that you can get some support here at the university, and two is that the software is available through the university for you to use. Plus, we know that it has great functionality with EndNote, which the university also resources. Covidence, as I said, I'm sorry I can't comment on. Covidence, Atlas, Leximancer, there's a whole range of cacti out there, if I can call them that. So I'm sorry, it's not an answer. Okay, can we use this software for quantitative data? Okay. Oh, is NVIVO free? Oh, okay, I'm missing some questions. Caitlin, is NVIVO free to install and use as an SU? Yes, it is. Especially if you are near a campus, you can go to the computer labs and you will find it there as an available piece of software. And the new versions are that cloud-based version, and it looks really good, and it's a good piece of software for your work. So yes, you can do it there, and use it on the computers, but you can also contact IT, and I saw Alison put the link in for technology services.
Great.
Can we use can we use this software for quantitative data?
That's a
okay,
good question.
it is, and it's a yes and no answer. Yes, you can put your quantitative data in there, but it doesn't have the statistical analytical power that something like SPSS has. So you can look at the data and you can move it around and you can make comments on it, the same as you can, a piece of text, but you're not going to be able to do the statistical work. Now, my understanding is that Lumivero is developing the quantitative aspects as well as part of their overall package. Yeah, I'm going to talk about another one, Satavi, a little bit later as well. So yes, you can put it there, but no, you're not going to be able to do the stats work that you need to do with it, but it's something that may come in the future. So just for now, qualitative work, but still with the advantage for quantitative researchers that it brings all of your work together, keeps it in order, and helps you to track what you're doing, to make your comments, and to write and to publish beyond that. So sorry, can't give you more detailed answer than that. Okay, yep, good. Okay, so we've caught up on questions. Woohoo! Okay, let me ask you a question. Oh, hold on, let me show you a question. What data sources are you expecting to work with in your research? So is it an interview? Is it a survey? Are you going to go through library archives? Are you going to go through a gallery of photographs? What sort of data sources? Oh, okay, good. Okay. We've got interviews. This is interesting. Okay. Interviews, Zoom and phone interviews. Okay. Logs, surveys, documents, video data. Okay. Social media, podcasts. Wow. Okay. It's really interesting in the last 10 to 20 years how the data that can be analyzed easily has increased. So now these high or data dense sources can be used. So pulling a video in for research purposes is now possible. I was looking at, believe it or not, the Star Wars Clone Wars series. So I can bring in I can access the videos, and then I can start analyzing them using NVIVO. Now, I won't embed a video in my NVIVO project, it's too big, but it'll sit to the side and I can create all the links and do all the analysis. So there's some of the things that some of you will be doing. Here's some more. Interview-based socioeconomic surveys involving qual responses. Okay. Interviews of key informants, open-ended responses, Qualtrics surveys, and interviewing people in literature. Okay, so we've got a wide range of data sources. Thank you very much for that. Looks like some interesting projects, and that's just data sources as opposed to what we're. So we've been delivering stats and SPSS. Oh, that's Alison saying yes. Yeah, look, I can't speak highly enough of the Postgrad Association. They will resource you with everything they can to make sure that things go well for you. So please make sure you note that down. Okay. Data. What sort of data can we use here? Now, this is an example of a research project, and you'll see over in the navigation page, the navigation pane, that different folders have been set up for inclusion of different data types. So this was a wide-ranging project. If you want to look at it, when you access NVIVO, you'll find this as the sample project that Lumivero makes available to you. So there are interviews, literature, that's been accessed, news articles, social media, and surveys. Now, when we have a look here at the list view, you will see that there are different icons next to the different interviews that are there. So we can tell by looking at that we've got some documents, like Margaret here, for example, her interview is included as a document. Helen's, however, is an audio file. They've been brought together, they've been put together in this folder that's been created just for interviews. So that's one of the data sources. Now, this has already gone through and it's been coded. So 38 codes here, 39. So for Dorothy, 39 different codes were applied to the interview. And there are 128 pieces of text that were coded. Now, also way over here on the far right, somebody has gone and used these colored spots to designate something else that will be useful to them. Maybe you can apply these things in different ways. Maybe to say, yep, I've gone through and I've finished coding on this one, or I'm only up to code number 30, and so I've got to go through and look at the other things. So different ways you might use them. What else is there on here that we need to point out? There's this other little sign here, this linking sign. A memo has been created in regards to something to do with Ken. So here on the list view, we get a whole lot of information about what's happened with these particular data sources. There's a range of them. They've been assigned to different people. They've been coded. They've been linked. And there's some extra information that has been attached to them through these colored spots. Is there a facility to apply color legend? Not so much the legend. You can use the colored spots if that's what you're referring to, Anna. Correct me if I've misunderstood your question. But what you should do is when you are working out what the colors mean, you create a memo and you write in that memo, yellow equals from New South Wales, blue equals from Queensland. Now, you've probably got them classified anyhow, but whatever that meaning is, put it in a memo, and then it doesn't matter what happens, you can always go back to it and find it at a later point. When you are making methodological decisions, when you are making analytical decisions, or when it's just logistical decisions, create a memo, make a record. You can go back to it another time. When you go to your meeting with your supervisor and they say, so what does this mean? You think, oh, heck, I did that 3 weeks ago. I can't remember. But I have a memo. And so you can go back to it. So keep everything together, use memos, just click in there, create a new memo, or you can see here at the top on the menu banner, click there, select memo, create a memo, and then preserve your information forever. Again, it speaks to rigor and saves a lot of embarrassment when you're at your meeting later on. Okay, caught up on questions. Okay, this is where it can be quite powerful and where some of you are going to find it very useful. This is just a part of the details view that I've dislodged from its page, just to make it a little bit bigger for us. What we have here is a section of video. So there's a still for us. And across the top, you can see that sound graph that's been put there. You can get NVIVO to play it for you, and you will see that little blue cursor thing there will move across, and you'll hear the sound that corresponds to it. And when it gets to the part where where coding has taken place, well, actually, as it plays, it will highlight the part of the text that it is playing. So there's a link between the text and the sound file. Plus, you'll see here that they've found it really important to note this piece of text saying down east, I'd say Cedar Island, bloody blah. Have a look up here. You can see there's also an orange bar. This piece of sound, now it's not a piece of text, but this piece of sound has also been flagged or coded, just as we have the text here that's coded. So you actually don't even need to have a textual transcript. You can just code based on the sound files or on the video files in this case. So that's an option. For me, that doesn't work. I'm too visual for that to work. I need to have the transcript I can play with. But for some people, that might be a very good option. Now, this is a picture of a video. But if this was, say, a picture, a JPEG that you had brought into your as a data source, then depending on what your interests are in your research, you would create a box, say around the background, and you would note that there's a pine forest here. And so you would be effectively coding the picture. So with NVIVO, we can encode the sound, or we can also encode pictures as well. So we can draw a box here and we make a note that this is pine forest. And if you've got a thing for flannelette shirts in your research, you could put a box around that as well. So there are infinite possibilities. It depends on the limitations of your data sources, but also on your theory, your methodology, and your research questions. Other than that, everything is possible. Okay. Surveys. I know that some of you are interested in doing surveys. Surveys can also be inputted. Now, Qualtrics, I know that someone is doing a Qualtrics, planning on a Qualtrics survey. Regardless of what it is, it might just be something that you then get brought in on an Excel file, Excel spreadsheet, or directly you can export from your Qualtrics and you can import it. Now, you'll also see here that these columns are in different colors. Now we've got the top row is highlighted because that's the one that's being investigated at the moment, but the columns are different colors. Excuse me. In these the white columns, we've got the qualitative data. So something here, don't know what the questions are, but this is about coding for the natural environment. Something is about good, it's peaceful, it's serene. You know, here's the rich qualitative data, these three columns here. But these other columns are also important, not because they have the data so much as they specify the classification of the person who was surveyed. So this person who was designated DE004 returned their survey on the 16th of the 12th. They live in the township of Smyrna, and that's they work for the company of Williamstown or something. So we're able to bring these in and tell NVIVO automatically, I don't want to have to go in and then say that this person lives in this town and lives in this other town. NVIVO will do that for you, and it will then sort out the things that relate to the classification of the surveyed person from the rich data that they have put in. So you'll be given some questions. What do I do with the different rows? You'll say, this is data, this relates to the classification, and NVIVO will sort all of that for you automatically. So it saves a heck of a lot of time. And you can deal with big data sets. This one's, if you look at the bottom, there's 104 survey responses. I would consider that quite small comparison to some that I've seen. This is a really, really interesting function. NVIVO very early on developed a function called encapture. Now, on my computer screen, when I open up my Explorer, I've got this little NVIVO icon thing with the arrow on it. It just sits up there as an add-on in my Explorer page. So when I go to a website and I think, wow, that is the information I need to include as a data source. Now, I had an interest in looking at media statements made by the Prime Minister's office. Oh, it's hard work going through and collecting all those pages. Except, and capture is there. I can say I want to capture it as a PDF, or the web page as a PDF, or just turn it into like a printed article as a PDF, and it will save it, and then I can bring it into NVIVO, and I've got it there sorted. Now, this is particularly important if you're going to do social media research, and I noted that quite a few people were. Make sure that you get encapture included in your with your Internet Explorer, so that you can go through and access a whole range of social media data. Now, that might mean you go to a Twitter website and there's a Twitter feed. So use encapture and it will capture the Twitter feed for you. So it will keep that one thing that you are wanting to look at in the context of the stream of the Twitter feed. So encapture is certainly a good way to access more data and to easily bring it into your research project. Yeah, it's so handy. Oh, yes, it is. Now, this is the summary version of the types of data that you can bring into your NVIVO project. So I'm guessing that will cover most of your needs. Now, the first four are very much products within the Lumivero stable of software. At risk has to do with risk management, and Excel Stat is the work that they're starting to do on bringing stats in as well. How that works yet, I don't know. I haven't played with that one. Citavi I'm interested in, but I haven't played with it because we've got EndNote, and I find that's really useful. And I'll be talking about EndNote next week when we look at the book reviews, literature reviews. So Citavi is the stable mate of NVIVO, and certainly it's being promoted alongside NVIVO. But for us, where we are at the moment, EndNote would be my recommendation as your bibliographic software. So other than that, there are pictures, there's videos, there's audio files, there's Twitter, there's OneNote, there's Excel, SurveyMonkey, a whole range of things that you can see there. So you'll get access to this information later. Okay, anybody want to ask a question while I rehydrate? Nope, okay. Is there Zoom? Is there Zoom for information? No, but when you save your Zoom file, you will have a file that you'll be able to use, but directly integrating with Zoom isn't something that NVIVO does.
Looks like there's a video file there.
There is.
Yeah.
Yep. So you can access, you can use video files. As I said earlier, most video files, though, you wouldn't directly import into NVIVO. You would have them as an external file. So they will sit on your hard drive and NVIVO will link to them. And then you still do all the analysis, but it doesn't clog up NVIVO by sitting in the project. So it's software space saving arrangement that they've got. But yeah, you're still able to do it and use the video. Okay. what are the things that you are expecting to study in your research? Now, a thing might be, I interviewed some scientists. So they are things that I researched. However, at a fundamental level, as a thing, they were a person, but I classified them as scientists over against laypersons who are non-scientists. So I had two classifications for person. What are the things that you are expecting to study? And it might not be persons. And what are some of the ways in which you think that they will be classified? Vocal bird and predators. Okay. Okay, Zoe, going back to that, are there any other things that will be included in your research? Like, will there be persons interviewed, or will it just be birds that you're looking at?
At the moment, I'm still trying to work it up, but
yeah, that's fair.
what I want to do is improve the monitoring process to get more objective data. So what is coming towards those birds or disturbing those birds within a certain radius, and what impact is that having?
Okay, so I would imagine then that predators might then be a thing.
Yeah.
They might be classified as avian or fox. So they might be classifications you have under this.
Yeah, there'll be different natural ones. There could be reptiles such as your lace monitor goannas, which are cold-blooded. Definitely your foxes. But then there's also the human disturbance as well. And also you've got gulls and crows, which are up in the air attacking.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things you will need to consider is, what is the thing or the entity that you are studying, and what are their attributes? How are they going to be classed? Because that sounds like it could be a little bit complicated, but once you've sorted it out, it would make it quite simple for you.
Yeah.
Psychologists, that's another type of entity. I would ask, that'd be classified. Think about, so we've got psychologists and smokers, health professionals, people with long COVID. What are some of the classifications that you might apply? What are some of the attributes that would be appropriate for you in your research? Now, you may not know for sure, but just at a guess. An example is athletes. A person, and they're being classified according to their role, and their role could be athlete or could be coach, and I'm guessing they're being classified according to the male or female.
You might say that again for us, Robert. Your mic or internet was dropping in and out.
Sorry, okay. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Courtney's. I can see that there are two possible types of classification. We've got, my suggestion here would be that we classify the thing that Courtney is studying as a person, and then they have attributes. One attribute would be sex, so we have male or female, and then another attribute would be role, and that would be coach or athlete. So they are the different buckets that we start to divide people in as well. So health patients, relative staff.
I think we lost you again there, Robert.
Really? I'm sorry. I don't know
that's
why.
Better. Like, I don't know. That's
okay.
I'll
stay closer to the microphone. Oh, someone's trying to break up with me. Okay, so yeah, okay, my apologies. Classification is an important thing for us to consider because it starts to help us see the nuance within the data. So it might not just be all the athletes who are saying a particular thing. If we go and dig deeper, then we might be able to pull it apart and say, well, actually, the male athletes are saying this thing, but the female athletes are saying something different. Or we think all sports people have the same sort of attitude, but when we dig deeper through our classifications, we find out that athletes and coaches are actually not on the same page as far as one topic goes, but in agreement on another topic. So being able to classify and group or subgroup the things that we're studying could be very important. Mostly what has been specified here involves people. We've got the birds as another option. Some of you might, or some projects that I've seen, it's been a matter of studying different organizations. So different companies or different councils. So they are also entities, and they will be classed as entities that have specific attributes, like the state that they are in or the type of industry within which they work. And then for each attribute, there will be particular values or particular details. If you have a look here on the screen, you'll see that we have community as an attribute for Barbara. And Barbara lives in the community of Betty. So Barbara is classified as a people. There is an attribute of township, and the specific value that applies to Barbara is straits. Now we can pull together all the people who were interviewed who live in straits and find out what they think on a particular topic. And then we can compare it to all the people who live in a different township. So you need to think through very much about how you're going to classify and break down the identity of these people into the qualities that are important and relevant for your studies. Okay, age, class, number of children too. Yes, all of those sorts of things. Year of birth is another way of looking at age. Sometimes that's put in. Mothers, ideologues, pedagogues, personal philosophy. Yep, they're all different ways they're all different values that are attached to a type of category or attribute that belongs to a class of entity. Mostly it's going to be people as the entity. Married, unmarried, divorce. Yep. Yeah, whatever you think of, it can be applied in these ways. It's just got to be something that's going to be useful and relevant to your research. Business owner or founder, length of ownership, core business. Yeah, good. Okay, you're thinking this through. That's very good. Okay. How are you going to investigate your data? So specifically, will you use a framework of concepts to code? So something that's already pre-established, say another worker's already worked, another researcher has already worked on this? Or are you allowing a framework to emerge from the data itself? So you create the coding framework yourself. And sometimes people will do both, but I'm interested to see what your responses are. Okay, looks like most are going to see what arises out of their data at this point. Using the model of service delivery has different steps. Okay, so it sounds like for Julie, there's some predetermined coding to take place. Dennis used both frameworks from key informant interviews. Practitioners who do the survey may contribute other data. Yep. Karen's still deciding. Sometimes it'll be both. Sometimes it'll be a hybrid. But again, it's a matter of working out what is appropriate for you with your project, with your understanding of reality, of epistemology, and then the methodology. Okay, so there's a range of things being decided on there. Coding is one of the things that NVIVO really helps facilitate. It's a matter of setting up creating a node, that place at which the coding is done. Now, there's an example here on the page in front of you. So there's a document that's open here, the boost for bushfire recovery. I'm in the middle of coding that paragraph. So I've highlighted it in blue. And now this menu has opened up for me. I can go through and I can make a code up, or if there were other codes already established, I could use one. It'll just bring up the most recently coded ones for me to choose from. Code NVIVO, definitely not using that one here. To code NVIVO is when it will create the code with the name that's identical to the text that you've highlighted. But to have a name that's a paragraph long is, yeah, you wouldn't use that under this circumstance. Or if I have coded it, I highlight and say, look, just get rid of the code. I could actually make a new annotation. I could add some data here. I could add some information, make a note here myself that would accompany and stay with that highlighted piece as well. I could export it as PDF, print, copy, all those sorts of things. Or down the bottom, PDF properties, it would tell me more about this particular document itself. But the idea is to go through according to your methodology and your theory and identify what are the parts of the text or the picture or the video, whatever the data is, that are relevant to my research question. You then highlight it and give it a name. So we are giving it a name, and that will be the code that is used and then applied in other places as relevant. On this page, you'll see over on the left that we've got a structure developing for our coding. So attitude, you'll see it's got that little plus to its left. So we could open that and we'll find that we've got some other codes that are subcodes of attitude. We've got balance, we've got a structure that is developed. What we do with our structures of coding is that we move parts of them around as our understanding of the data and the way it corresponds to our research question evolves. So when I've got a structure set up, I think that the question of infrastructure actually belong under economy. So I'm going to pick up infrastructure and drop it into economy and then make it a subcode under economy. So I can move and play with it the same as I do with other folders in Windows. It's a matter of developing an understanding of the codes, how they relate to each other, as a way of summarizing the relevant data that we are discovering in the text of our documents or other data sources. Attitude has been opened up here. You'll see here in this little blue window that's opened up. What it tells me is something about this code that has been created. When it was created, a definition was written for it. Now, as I was saying earlier, make memos as a way of keeping track of the different decisions that you make along the way. When you create a new code, write a description of what that code means to you. some advantages of doing that. One is, if you forget, doesn't matter, there it is. Again, it helps you with rigor. You can address the questions that another person will put to you about what that means. It also means if you come across something else that you think codes to the same place, and then you have a look at them, you think, no, that description doesn't fit, that means the other thing needs to have a code with a different name. Now, the big advantage is, at the end of your project, you can say, I've created all these codes, I've checked them, I've refined them, I've got my structure of how parent nodes and child nodes, the subcode, how they relate to each other. I'm now going to print this off automatically, and that will be my code book. So all the codes that you have created with their definitions can be printed off, rather than you have to copy and paste or make up something at the end. You've got it all there, all recorded. Again, adds to your rigor if you've done it rigorously, but it's structured and will add to your rigor. So I advise doing your descriptions as you go along. Look, an extra bit to this, I also recommend creating a memo for your code definitions. What are the parts of a code definition that you need? Is there a title that you should have, or the name of it? Is there a brief description of what it means? Is there a brief description of what is excluded from under that code as well? And if you have that in the memo as the structure, then you've got that to refer to when you are writing your description of your code, so that you can then write a structured description that will be consistent across your whole project, and will just produce that structured code book for you at the end. Okay, any other questions at this point? Nope. Okay. Another advantage that we find with NVIVO is it helps us to visualize. Now, some of the visualizations you will access will just show you Bob and Margaret. They've been coded, but let's pull all their codes together and see how much overlap there is between their coding. And you might not do much with it other than realize, wow, there is a lot of overlap here I need to take notice of. Or, as I suspected, they don't actually overlap much. But because you visualize it rather than just looking at the numbers, that may be a useful way for you to look at something. There are also some practical applications of the visualizations which may end up being reproduced in your reports, in your research findings. We've got some different visualizations here. Even a word cloud I found once was a useful thing after some research I'd done with a group in Europe. This diagram over here is showing how codes are related to other codes. So you can see some are linked and some are standing out by themselves. And then here's a dendrogram showing the relationship between different documents. So the ones that are close together are closely related, or at a certain level, these ones are related, but this is a different grouping here, and then we've got this big grouping here that's way out on this end. So a whole range of different visualizations. Now, there is a warning that comes with this. We can be driven by thinking there's some pretty pictures that I can draw here, and I can make sure that they've got some really bright colors added in as well. We have to be careful that we don't get caught up in what's going to look pretty and slick, and actually what is going to be useful for telling the story of the research that we've been investigating. So Visualizations are good. They're going to be a little way off from most of the projects at the moment. But keep in mind that they're there as tools rather than, they're not the ends in themselves. They're tools to help us along the way and may also be useful in helping us to communicate. Okay. As you are developing your project, either formally writing about it or actively engaging in it, there's some tips I've got for you that you may find useful. One is to take note. Now, this is something we were discussing earlier with Julie, but note as part of your approach to analysis that you are using NVIVO. And I would suggest NVIVO 14 in brackets Lingard, just as a way of formally acknowledging it. You will make note of references that you read and have a bibliographic notation for them. I think it's important also to note the software that you're doing, that you're taking advantage of as well. The reason for that is that software isn't without value. It guides the way that we work in certain ways, and it's good for others who are reviewing to know that this is how you did your work. Make sure that you take time in the space of your writing to explain the NVIVO terms that you have applied. So if you are talking about how you classified the different people that you interviewed, talk about what were the attributes that you assigned to them and what were the different values. So you are explaining the concepts that you used and the way that you used them, so as to reassure your reviewer or the other person who's looking at your work that either you know what these things are, or at least you are defining them in the way that's specific to your project. But regardless, it's clear what you have done. So make sure you spend some time doing that as part of your methods. So explain what they are and then how you use them. I would also suggest that rather than just saying, yeah, I used NVIVO and this is how I did it, but also as a way of giving some greater strength to your work, consider finding some other research that used NVIVO in a similar way. So is it someone, look, there's a great paper, I can't remember it's really old now, but Onwubuzi and Leach wrote a paper on 20 different ways you can apply NVIVO for your psychology research. That's useful to have if you're engaged in psychology discipline. It's also useful to have if you're saying, I'm going to apply it in whatever discipline because of the methodology that I have. Here's a paper that might be supportive of that application. So look at the theory that you're applying, look at the methods, consider your discipline, and see if there are references that will say, yes, this is a good thing to use, or here's a good thing to use, but use it this way so that it's actually more consistent and will give you greater validity in your research. Oh, now the bad news. I've had students nearly give up with NVIVO because the setup is tedious. I'd like to just give you good news, but reality check. When you have a large amount of data, when you have, especially if you've got something like a survey, although that can be automated if it's in Excel, but when you've got data sources and you've got classifications, and you may have a range of different sources for a range of different persons or other entities, then you need to bring each of these things into NVIVO, and then you need to make sure that each of those things is correctly connected. So you want to make sure that the interview with Barbara corresponds to this person that we've created called Barbara, which also corresponds to the letter that Barbara wrote and the social media feed that we found from Barbara, as well as we need to do the same thing for each of the other 50 people. So it can be tedious and it can be time consuming. You are dealing with new concepts if it's your first time. The number of details, it just expands logarithmically with each new entity being researched, but it's worth it. The payoffs are worth it because it links everything, it keeps it in order, and it just guides you in your thinking. Now, if you have a smaller sample of participants, it's time consuming. It's less time consuming, but you still have to do the same. You still have to go through the same process, making sure everything is connected in the way that it needs to be. And I'm talking about doing this before you get to your analysis. But in doing this, your analysis and the conclusions you can draw are more likely to make sense. Now, cross-referencing. Yeah, I haven't thought of it in terms of cross-referencing. I suppose that's one way to look at it. For me, it's about linking. Just making sure that all the different parts can be linked together. So that the documents, the classifications, the classes of person, the sets that you set up and all the memos and then the annotations, just making sure that they fit where they're supposed to. Every now and again, you'll think, hold on, I'm supposed to be getting a different result here when I look at my numbers. And then you'll discover, oh, hold on, that's because I forgot to say that this document belongs to Roger. And once you put that in, you'll see that it comes together better and you can be more confident in the conclusions that you draw. Linking, lovely, very handy if you happen to, rhizomatic approach, yes, okay. That sounds like it might be an education student. Okay, I think if you're doing rhizomatic, you also may find some use from the dendrographs as well, just as a little thing for later on. Okay, so that's my warning. However, I also have a 5 thou shalt nots. Don't let the software take the credit for your work. Don't go writing or explaining to your supervisor, this is what NVIVO did. NVIVO is going to do the analysis for me. No, it didn't. No, it's not going to. NVIVO has no agency. Now, one day when it gets linked up with an AI, that might be a different conversation that we're having. Lunavero is working at connecting with ChatGPT. I don't know what that will look like or what they're intending, but that will be an interesting space to watch. Yeah, not too far away. Yes, I think you could be right on that one, Nicola. They are actively looking at connecting with an AI at present. So don't let the software take the credit. You are the agent. You are the one who is acting in the role of researcher. So this is what I did using this tool. Oh, okay. Grammar error in the next one. Typo. Thou shalt not minimize humanity. Most of your research is going to involve qualitative research with persons. It is very easy to abstract all that data, throw it into something like NVIVO, treat it like a black box, and then forget that we're actually working with people. So as a matter of respect, and as a matter of ensuring that we have validated research amongst persons, and that we're adhering to the principles of justice as well, don't lose sight of the persons who you are researching with all this data. Thou shalt not inflate claims of rigor. I've used NVIVO, therefore I know that my conclusions are really good and valid and just, and you should all take notice of my research. Garbage in, garbage out, even if it's got a nice, slick piece of software to put the garbage through. So this is a tool that can help you with rigor, but you have to use it rigorously. You have to apply your methods systematically. You have to engage knowingly with the software as well. And then you can be confident that your research and your conclusions have some value. So don't go saying, NVIVO did the work and it's all rigorous. No, let's get some evidence for those things. Don't get caught up in blind doing. It's a nice piece of software. And I've got to say, this thou shalt not applies to me as much as any of the others. It's so easy to think, oh, I've got this process under control now. I know what's happening. I can just go ahead and do this and this and this and this. And at the end, I can print out a pretty little graphic and all that's really wonderful. And I've forgotten, but hold on, was that actually contributing to addressing my research question? Or did I stray from the careful confines of my methodology just because this was easy or enjoyable or distracting? So be careful with that as well. And thou shalt not hide behind a black box. Don't say, yeah, look, I've done all this. I'm not quite sure how I got to this point, but yeah, this is really interesting what it says. No. We need to understand the concepts we're working with, the processes that we have engaged in our analysis and in our inquiries and in our reporting, so that we can justify our conclusions when somebody wants to ask us the tough, detailed questions about our research process. So this is as much about process as anything. Please be mindful of the processes you are engaging in. Now, are there any questions on that point, or those points? Okay.
Robert, it's Dennis. I have a question.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi. Have there been any studies that have looked at if coding an analysis is done manually, that is a person doing it in their head, compared against coding of the same data done by NVIVO? Do they end up with the same results, or do they vary, or what?
Gee, that is a very, very good question. And I've got to say, I've never asked that question of the literature. I don't know. It's a simple answer. There are studies that talk about the quality of research being produced with a cactus that continually remind us, no, we've got to do this properly. But as a comparison, I will look that up, Dennis, because I'm interested in finding that. One of the things I was going to say towards the end is that I'm going to send you a list with just a few references on it, but I will go and hunt that out and add that to the list to you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't give you a more specific targeted response.
Don't be sorry. Thanks for being honest.
Anything else at this point?
Peter has his hand up. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, Robert, I just wanted to go back a couple of slides. There was something I think also Sarah asked about the, just here, when you've got the top line to the in-text of acknowledging NVIVO, do you normally also put anything in the reference list for that in-text, like that acknowledgement?
I don't.
Okay, cool. No,
I have seen it done in some papers, but by and large, no. Where there are bibliographic references, obviously they get cited. But it's usually enough to make a note of the software that was being used.
Excellent. Thank
So
you.
the same as you would do with ChatGPT in your methodology.
Okay, cool.
Being provocative there. I think it's a great tool. We'll work with that in more detail another time, I'm sure. Oh, is there anything else before I move on?
Karen's got her hand up. Over, Karen.
Oh, I can't see that one. Oh, hello, Karen.
Hello. Thank you. I was wondering, Robert, if you have, and it relates to that slide that Peter got you to go back to as well. If you have, you say support your research with references that you employed NVIVO, would you have an example where you've seen that used where obviously our coding and things would be different, but a paragraph or two that had that?
Sorry, can you reword that?
So, for example, you've probably used NVIVO and supported your research with references in your methodology.
Yep.
Would you have a couple of lovely paragraphs? Or... Is that too much? Well, not yours necessarily, but I wondered if you said you were going to send us some references, if one of those might have a little glimpse of that.
Yeah, look, that is my intention, that there will be some references from a range of disciplines, now that I have an idea of the range that we've got represented here, so that you can see how NVIVO is being incorporated into other sorts of research projects that may be similar to yours. Now, that will still be modified by methodology. So just because someone's in the same discipline as you doesn't mean that their methodology was. So there may be some details that will need to be altered, although the general approach will still be consistent. Excuse me.
Yes, thank you. I just think it's much easier to change something that you can see than to start.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yes, my intention is that you will have access to that as a way of being helpful. Now, any work on GP? Know who?
I might just jump in there with the chat GPT. Look, I think currently the university is scrambling to catch up on how to manage chat GPT, but it's already, for example, I'm doing some marking in the Faculty of Education, and anyone that's familiar with Turnitin, Turnitin is already giving a chat GPT percentage in Turnitin. So,
Really?
So they're already trying to use it, but I think they also need to, you know, I don't know, share some information with students and teachers about, you know, how to use it and how can it be used and how to avoid it, or whatever their stance is on, going to be on it. So yeah, I think that's, you know, just keep an eye on your student emails to see if there's, you know, any statement from the university. I think they're madly working on it now.
I know of an academic who is setting assignments to be done using ChatGPT.
Oh, really?
So he's exploring the process.
Yes.
Again, garbage in, garbage out. But if you do it right, I'm certainly finding it very powerful.
Yeah. And there's there's a question there from Courtney about thematic analysis.
How does it relate to thematic analysis? Are they one and the same? No, they're not. There are lots of different methodologies and lots of different methods. So NVIVO will help you do analysis, but what sort of analysis is it? Are you doing a realist evaluation? Are you doing a thematic analysis? Are you, there are a huge range of different methods. This is something that we could talk about later, Alison, if that's a useful thing.
Sure.
Because going through and applying the methods specifically is something that each researcher needs to work out how to do. But it's something that we can talk about because, you know, the different types of analysis will involve a lot of common processes, but some of the processes will be different because the approach is different. Okay, and constructivist. Constructivist is a methodology. It's a different way of understanding how we make knowledge, but it's different again to a thematic analysis. So
I was linking, well, the research that I found that is similar to my ontology is links constructivist with thematic analysis. And I know the uni does NVIVO, so I wondered if that is, I can swap out thematic analysis for NVIVO.
Oh,
that links with my philosophical, no?
Okay, thank you. I understand your question better now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, NVIVO is the tool. Thematic analysis in your circumstance is the thing that you want NVIVO to help you accomplish.
Got it.
Now,
So
somebody else might use this tool in a slightly different way for another kind of analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the tool to help you do your thematic analysis rigorously so that you can draw good, validated, trustworthy conclusions.
Okay. So in my methodology, when I comment, I would link constructivism obviously with thematic analysis, and then would I just say I will be using NVIVO software to do this?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I will be doing it this way and following these processes and these particular 6 phases, which we can talk about another time.
They're the thematic analysis 6 phases, are they?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Is it Braun and?
Yes, Braun and Clark, I think.
Yep.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Thank you.
So you'll just follow their phases. But yeah, NVIVO is the tool. It's not the analysis.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I didn't need to further go into explaining NVIVO if I've kind of explained thematic analysis and those 6 steps.
Yep. It sounds like you're sorting it in your head. That's brilliant.
Okay, thank you.
Tina. I'm not using ChatGPT. Yeah, don't worry about ChatGPT. But it is fun. Just play with it in your spare time at the moment. Okay, Tina, I'm an honours student analysing interview data in a phenomenological investigation. What resources should I look at to get an overview of how to use NVIVO before beginning my project? Are there any worked examples I can point to? Yeah, I'll try and make a note phenomenological, no specific. I'll try and hunt out a reference to add to the list for you, Tina. The resources that you need are explanations of what are the necessary parts of the analysis or the analysis process that you need to consider. So yeah, that's what you need at the moment. Just an understanding of what phenomenology is and how it's investigated. And then we just operationalize that investigation using this tool. And the way you do that will have lots of overlap with the thematic analysis that Courtney's going to do, but there will be distinctives guided by your methods. Methods guided by your methodology. Okay. I was talking about the thou shalt nots, looking at some ethical considerations. Something else for you to consider, which is sometimes at best a second thought. I'm assuming that many of you will work with information that is private and confidential and has been consented to under the university's ethical approach. But at times it may be that you need someone else outside your project to come and have a look. You know, I'm doing this phenomenological study and I don't know what's going on. The coding is all wrong and I just can't work out how to link these codes with this particular classification. Who's someone who knows NVIVO who can look at this? So it's a really practical question. A practical solution needs to be found. But keep in mind that you have information that's been collected under very strict consent rules. So ensure that any information is de-identified before your NVIVO person comes and looks at it. And it may be, depending on the extent of your project, some of the bigger masters or PhD projects may need to consider including an NVIVO advisor at some point as a variation on the ethics application, just so that you've got that ongoing support if you think it's going to be there. I think that's going to be important. So just keep that in mind as an additional ethical consideration for your research.
Excuse me, Robert.
Yes,
Dennis, I don't understand that second point.
Okay. Depending on when there is research being undertaken amongst human persons, an ethics application has to be submitted to the university. Now, there's separate applications that need to be done when there's research among animals, but they don't have privacy concerns. So it's amongst the people that I'm most concerned for at this point. So if I'm going to engage in a project and it's a simple one, just surveying people, there's probably going to be unidentifiable information in that. But quite a lot of qualitative projects will involve interviewing people and sometimes about difficult, at times, things. So it's sensitive research. It's being shared under very strict arrangements with the university's ethics system, which is part of the national approach to ethics. Now, part of that application process is that these are the people who are involved in the project directly. So there's me as the student researcher, and I've got, say, 2 supervisors. Well, depending on how you think it's going to shape up and what sort of help is going to be needed, it may be appropriate to say, look, I'm going to need someone fairly often, I think, just to keep me on track with NVIVO. In which case you talk to your supervisors about maybe if they need to really delve into this project on my computer, then maybe there needs to be a variation to the ethics approval that should be sought. Now, that's not going to affect most of you, but I just raise it as something to consider for the future as well. Now, a lot of the problems will be able to be solved without this being an issue, but I'm just raising it as something that we should be aware of.
So the NVIVO advisor would advise during the preparation of the ethics application or all the way through the project?
Look, my expectation is that most people just won't have a problem.
Okay.
Those who do will find that talking with someone who understands NVIVO will sort the problem out for them. But occasionally there is someone who needs to come in and help sort out an issue. Look, I'm thinking of a student I worked with quite a number of years ago. She was doing a PhD. She was studying a whole range of educational those pedagogues. And I was helping her with her project from an NVIVO support side. Now, at some point, I realized her NVIVO project was inside out. It wasn't going to give her the conclusions that she thought it was giving her. There were a couple of mistakes made in the way that things were entered and connected with each other. So I needed to actually have quite an in-depth look at what she was doing in order for that to happen. Now, it's not many, but I just raise it now to say, remember, it's like that point earlier, don't lose sight of humanity in amongst all the data.
Mhm.
Remember that there are serious protocols around what we're doing. There is a very, very great privilege that we have when people share deep and personal information about themselves.
Mhm.
And it may be that to honor that under certain circumstances, which will be a rare occurrence, that an NVIVO advisor is brought on, and there needs to be a variation in the ethics application just to acknowledge that, and so that no one can come to you and say, you let these other people look at this data. You can say, yes, they did, but we took all these steps and made sure it was done safe and ethically and honored the gift of sharing that these interview participants gave to us.
So the NVIVO advisor is being brought into the project right up front to make sure that the use of NVIVO all through the project would not contravene any, would not produce any ethics problems.
Okay, thank you. I think I need to clarify something. So I don't mean to say that the use of NVIVO would contravene ethics. It's just that there may not be ethical approval, or there won't be ethical approval for someone outside the project, in this case, someone, an NVIVO advisor, won't have approval to see this personal confidential information. So that just needs to be considered. Probably does need to be brought on at the beginning, and probably only when there's a problem that can't be fixed any other way.
Okay, so that's to avoid parachuting someone in halfway through, and someone who wasn't mentioned in the ethics application might then get access to private data.
I'm saying there is the possibility of parachuting them through. There is a process.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think I'm getting what you're saying. Yes.
Okay. Just to make sure that we preserve the
privacy all the way through.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was after, but yes, that's the thing that we're preserving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I think I get it. Thank you very much. It's just that I've never heard that before, and it's useful to me.
Okay, I sit on the ethics committee, and I know I have to maintain a high standard when I'm engaging with people as well and their data. So,
okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on, because we are nearly at the end. How to get your project started? Okay, my biggest tip is your supervisor is your friend. Even if your supervisor isn't, make sure that the supervisor becomes your friend, or at least always take that attitude. They are a resource for you to draw upon. Check with IT about accessing NVIVO. We've covered that. Know your theoretical approach, know your analytical approach, and know your methods specifically around coding. So think those things through carefully. Remember, this is the tool, and the tool will only give you or only help you find what you need in your data when all these other things are in place and the tool is used consistent with those other decisions that have been made. What you do then is import your data sources, classify the sources, establish your coding structure if that's relevant. If you're looking for an emerging structure, emergent coding, that won't be done initially, but you will structure it later. Follow your method, do it rigorously. Eat, sleep, repeat. And then ask for help as you need. And as I said, Postgraduate Association I've always found helpful too. So if I can, Alison, I'd say talk to Alison, she'll know who to refer you to. And I don't seem to be able to leave the uni. I'm always around somewhere. Based at Lismore, but always around. Okay. I'm going to So many pages open here. If you've got your phone, hold on, here we go. I'm going to drop this into the chat box. Oh, I've killed the chat box. Where did we go? Oh, there it is. Sorry. If you don't mind, just 5 simple questions again, just for a little bit of feedback. Wondering what's a good sample size? 20 to 50 cents. Okay, yes, it will provide value. Qualtrics session, yes, good, highly recommend it, love Qualtrics. But I think it's the wrong question. The question should be, how many how many surveys do you need consistent with your methods? So what is it about your project that determines how many surveys should be undertaken? So talk to your supervisors about that. And whatever the answer is, yes, NVIVO, definitely NVIVO. Okay. Following this introduction, I'm going to send you a worksheet. Well, Alison will send it through. I think that was the arrangement we came to. I will go and hunt out some more references and add that to a worksheet. And I think we'll send that out after next week's workshop as well, just so that you've got some extra tools there and you can see some examples of how other people are using NVIVO. Next week, I'm sure Alison's going to plug this. There's the literature review. I'm suggesting other things that could be looked at as how we deal with specific types of data. Interviews, there are so many shortcuts for dealing with interviews in NVIVO that's worth investigating. Or looking at specifics of analysis or visualizations. So they're just some of the things that I know that NVIVO can really hone in on. Also, I've done one-on-one workshops with students to help them with their data, particularly the high degrees research, helping them start their project and get it off on a very good footing.
Excellent, Robert. Thank you so much.
That's me done. Thank you.
Well done. And thanks, everybody. I think that was very, very helpful and informative. Lots of positive comments in the chat there. So excellent.
Thank you for that.
It was quite a busy chat box and email session for me. So everyone was highly engaged, which is excellent. I hope to all see you next Friday and for the next step. I'll stop recording now. So thanks, everyone.